This is an end of semester course review for SPC 1017 with Professor Sexton. I learned a lot in this class. I thought coming into it that it was going to be writing speeches and giving them in front of people, but it was more than a speech class, it was really a communication class. I learned about the differences between interpersonal and larger scale communication. For example, there's a difference in the way that you communicate with one person versus a small group like a classroom setting of 20 people versus 100 people, like getting up and giving some kind of a speech. I also learned about the cultural differences that affect communication. For example, some societies use more nonverbal communication than others, and some are strictly verbal. There are also such things as high context cultures and low context cultures. In high context cultures, it's important to understand the context or the setting in which you're communicating. That has a lot to do with the communication. Whereas in low context cultures, you can take the words more for what they are and not think about the context. This course was also really helpful with speech apprehension. I felt like doing this online, it provided a safer atmosphere. I personally am very fearful of getting up in front of people, and the thought of a speech class, when I realized it was a requirement, I was terrified. But doing it online is a nice segue, especially for people who are very afraid. You're still in front of people, so you still get nervous, but it's not as intimidating as standing up in front of a traditional classroom setting. I found that the course was very well organized in the way we moved through our lessons, especially the discussions. I really loved those. It was great to hear other people's opinions on the subjects that we spoke about. One discussion I really liked was the Free Hugs campaign. We spoke about if 50 years ago this campaign was performed, how people would react, and 100 years ago, how people would react. So it was a really good insight into the differences in communication historically in our country. I didn't know before this class that there were different techniques for different types of speeches. For example, if you're giving a speech about yourself, like a biographical or an autobiographical speech about somebody else, there is a certain format for it. For an informative speech, there's a very different format, and for a persuasive speech, there's a very, very different format. It was really interesting to learn these and to learn how to outline them so that you'd be prepared for your speeches, and I really learned a lot in that aspect. I found that working with a group was also really important in this class, not just because it was a requirement, but there was also a whole section that talked about group communication, the way groups discuss, brainstorm, solve problems, choose leaders. We learned about the different roles people assume in groups, and we had to say what role we felt we assumed the most, and that was really eye-opening. It was honestly kind of eye-opening into each person's personality as well. Overall, I really enjoyed the class. I feel like it helped me become more comfortable, not only with public speaking in front of a large group of people, but communicating in general. I found that the techniques are really useful for everyday life too. So I give the class an A+.